I just really love how I'll just say something random, like share a story about how I've changed your life and some of you actually do it. I just like, and you're my favorite people, by the way, my absolute faves, by the way. So okay, so we're gonna get started. I think everything is worked out. Um, so again, I am Lama Rod. I use he, him pronouns. I am teaching and living on the ancestral lands of the Muskogee, Creek, and Cherokee people here in Atlanta, Georgia, the ATL, Hot Atlanta. Um, I'm really happy to be here with everyone. This is our first, well, this is actually my first online offering of Chenrezig, or what we call the Chenrezig's Ring of Fire. Apparently my computer isn't quite working as well as it should today. So, I can't really get the music going. But for another session, we will, absolutely. So this is Chenrezig's Ring of Fire. And I offered this twice this summer at in East Hampton, at our retreat in East Hampton in August, and second at Wonderwell retreats. So many of you are coming in from those two places as well. And also maybe for those of you who joined me in December at Southern Dharma, we did a little bit of Chenrezig. Also, we did Chenrezig at the Sparsha retreat in October. So I've done it 3 or 4 times in person. So this is the first time we've gotten everyone together online. What felt important for Chenrezig was to do some kind of empowerment practice. And you have these recordings up on YouTube from our East Hampton retreat as well. I'm just going to go back through it again for those of you who haven't been able to sit in on that. Chenrezig, just getting into Chenrezig was really the first sadhana practice that I did when I started studying in the Kagyu tradition. And I would practice that with Lama Willa Baker, who is the guiding teacher at Wonderwell and Natural Dharma Fellowship. This was years ago, before Wonderwell and all of that, but we had a small practice group in Boston, actually in Watertown. And I would go there and we would chant Chenrezig. And so going to that group was the first time I chanted any formal practice, Tibetan practice. And I just loved it. I just really, something just like awakened in me, and that felt really special. And then before that, actually, I had a friend named Searing who worked in the neighborhood that I lived in Boston. And I would see him coming back and forth from work, to and from work. And he would always have his mala, saying a mantra. And one day I happened to be passing him on the sidewalk and, we stopped and talked, and I just go, "Oh, what are you chanting?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm doing Om Mani Padme Hum." And right on the corner, on the street there, my friend Sering gave me the initiation for the mantra, the same mantra that we're getting initiated into today, Om Mani Padme Hum. And that was before the sadhana, but like just doing a few rounds of Om Mani Padme Hum, I could feel the energy right, of the mantra. Back then I couldn't really explain what was happening, but I felt, just again, something opening, something releasing. And that I took that little bit of practice of the mantra into working with the sadhana later on. And Chenrezig, just became a really important practice for me. Chenrezig is the expression also of one of my main deities, six-armed Mahakala, or Chadrupa, is the Tibetan name. And Chadrupa just means 6 arms. And what really excited me was how Chenrezig, as this deity that embodies, personifies compassion and love, how that kind of compassion and love could be channeled really fiercely into the awakening of a wrathful being like Mahakala. And there are many Mahakalas as well, but I have a particular affinity for 6-armed Mahakala, black 6-armed Mahakala, to be precise. And I was thinking about this morning, and this isn't something that we're going to get into anytime soon, maybe later in the year, but we're going to be working with the transformation, which is an alchemy of Chenrezig into Mahakala eventually. But I'm probably going to wait till after my book comes out in October, because I have a whole kind of setup where I talk about masculine and femininity, gender, how energies manifest relatively and ultimately. I talk about God as the mother, God as the father, God as the creator, stuff like that. Essence of the mind, the nature of reality, linking all of that together, talking about the balance of dualities, of sacred dualities, right? The duality of the mother, and the father. Chenrezig tends to be more of an expression of the mother, whereas Mahakala, of course, is the expression of the father energies, right? Balancing these two energies, bringing them into wholeness, is actually how we get into the full essence, the full realization of the essence of all phenomena, which is also the essence of the mind itself, right? There's always this kind of rush, not a rush, but we have to understand and embody and move through the expression of duality, right? So you can't push one thing to a side and think you're going to get free with just the other side, right? You can't get free until everything is held equally in balance, right? When everything is brought into wholeness, then the essence of phenomena begins to awaken, right? So the essence of phenomena is emptiness, space, energy, right? And that's what we're trying to devolve back into, is that simple being within the nature of things. Again, you can't get there until you begin to hold space and do the emotional labor of working through the trauma of all this energy, that we've been hurt by, or that we have misunderstandings about, right? So another way to put this, right, is that we won't actually get free just with the mother, right? There has to be a recognition of the duality of mother and father, right? And then, of course, through the mother and the father, we get into the expression of oneness, one taste, maybe we can call it sometimes. For all you Shambhala people, it's like Buddha nature, but I don't use a lot of words like that anymore. Buddha nature, mindfulness, stuff like that. I'm just like, whatever, you know. Um, and this is all kind of topical too, because these are all things, as I said before, I will be offering in my next book, New Saints, which I have finished. It's with my publisher. I am free from the toil. I've been working on it for almost 2.5 years, but it seemed like it was just like the past 3 weeks when everything came together. But I talk a lot about deities, and dualism, gender, sexuality, sexual trauma, and tie it all together within practice. So it's going to be a very different book than we've ever read, I think, coming from a Dharma teacher. But I want to go back a little bit to this idea of unity, the balance of dualities, of sacred dualities, right? The sacred duality means that, again, everything has to be held, and we hold things by disrupting reactivity and beginning, therefore, to experience these energies, not react to them, experience. And then through experiencing these energies, the nature of these energies are revealed to us. So you can't get to the nature of anything through reactivity, because reactivity is aversion to the thing itself, right? It's a quick tap into that energy and then a recoil, right? So that's not experiencing. And what we're struggling with, I think, in the world right now is the lack of the capacity to experience energy, right? We push it away, we tuck it away. When we get energy trapped and tucked away, that's trauma, right? And that kind of trapping of energy in many ways gives rise to samsara, which in the New Saints tradition, I'm calling the carceral state. So samsara is an expression of carcerality, being bound, being trapped, but being trapped in delusion, right? And that delusion is fed by reactivity, to phenomena itself, to everything in phenomena, actually. So when we come back to Chenrezig actually is a practice of unification, of balance. So we see, as you say, Chenrezig is about love, but love is about wholeness in the system, Chenrezig practice system. So you see the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum, which I translate as homage to the jewel at the heart of the lotus. And so Om Mani Padme Hum is actually an erotic mantra. It's evocative and erotic. Some of us like that in our practice. Maybe some of us like it too much in our practice, Eric. Because it's about the union of the feminine and the masculine, right? So the mani, the jewel, is the masculine principle, the phallus, right? And Padme, the lotus, right, is the feminine principle. The oni is the oni, right? And bringing the jewel and the lotus together, which is, union practice is consort practice, right? But bringing that together, and that bringing together is actually supposed to awaken bliss. Like when we're whole, when we're being held together, when we're going through this experience of healing, it is actually an experience of bliss, right? And we may not feel bliss, because I believe that bliss is an experience that we can't have in the body, because it's actually much stronger than a physical body. It's a mental experience that we can have as energy bodies, as Sambhogakaya Buddhas, Sambhogakaya energy bodies, right? but we get close to that bliss through pleasure. A physical sign of that bliss is orgasm, you know. And that's why sex has and union has such this hold in our psyche and our relationships, because often an orgasm is the closest experience people will have to awakening, to union, to balance. So that's why we keep going there over and over again, you know, and it's fun, you know, and all kinds of stuff, right? So that's always important to understand, is that particularly in tantric traditions, you know, and this is a tantric practice, you know, we're trying to figure out where the openings are, right? And this is a great time for me to offer a matrix reference. For those of you who do medicine Buddha with me, this is just kind of normal, to have about 2-hour lecture on the matrix, but it's going to be a 5-minute talk. Basically, like in the matrix, you know, if you've seen the matrix, people come in and out of the matrix by they have to find a telephone, you know, and a telephone is like an uplink and a downlink. So if they can get to a telephone, it's like AOL back in the 90s, in the early 2000s, you had to plug the computer into, you know, the phone line into the computer, into the modem, and dial up, you know, to get in. And my mom hated, she hated that. She was like, why are you tying up my line? Like, I don't get it. Why are you always on this internet? You know? But going back to the movie, like, these were the portals that they used to move in and out of the matrix, from the real world to the matrix world. And in the same way, we are presented with these portals, right, in our regular lives that actually are really profound pathways to liberation. And what Tantra comes along and says is that let's use this portal, let's start thinking about it differently. So you can actually use this experience to actually awaken to the nature of things, right? So pleasure, ecstasy, right, is a doorway that we can use, but it's a doorway that comes with learning how to hold space for pleasure, not react to it, because many of us are still reacting to pleasure, not experiencing pleasure, and not allowing pleasure to actually kind of take us into the oneness, the nature of things itself, right? We get distracted by the pleasure instead of fully embodying the pleasure and allowing the pleasure to open up into the essence of phenomena, right? And so deity practices are portals, right? Many of the practices in Tantra are portals, you know, to awaken the mind in this way. So again, so Chenrezig is associated with love. Love is often translated as the wish for beings to be happy. I translate it as the need for beings to be free, safe, and have access to the resources that they need to be well. So it's more than just happy, because I'm not so much into happiness right now. You know, I'm much more into liberation, because happiness, we can get happy and still be trapped in the carceral state. There are a lot of happy people in the state right now. And so when we go for liberation, we're going to experience happiness, right? But you're not going to stop at happiness. So you can experience happiness, but you're going to say, but no, there's more to do. And you don't stop at happiness. You don't build a life around happiness. You just keep going, but you're experiencing happiness at the same time. And that's what I'm interested in right now, is the liberation over the happiness. a lot of people are, really presenting material around how to be happy and so forth. And that's fine because not everyone's interested in liberation, right? So if you're not interested in getting free, the work that I do may be very confusing and frustrating, because again, I'm not interested in being comfortable or happy. I'm interested in getting free, right? To get free, you're going to have to move through discomfort and pain and suffering, right? You have to lean into it and actually begin to awaken to the nature of these experiences. And that awakening is a portal that actually, helps us to touch into the nature of things really directly, right? And that's liberation. That's freedom. So when we practice Chenrezig, right, it is the practice of union. It's bringing extremes together. Chenrezig is also an expression of the Heart Sutra, which says that emptiness is form, form is emptiness, right? That there are two truths, there's emptiness and there's form. And both of those are true, but they're at their most truest when they're held together. As we read in the Heart Sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is no other than emptiness, emptiness is no other than form, right? And that's a contradictory teaching on purpose because the reality is a contradiction. Like this isn't happening, but it is happening, right? And to hold both of those truths together and to not continue getting lost in the analysis of the teaching, but to experience how that teaching begins to disrupt us, right? It is a gentle shoving that gets us out of this kind of comfort. You're not going to get free comfortable, right? If that were the case, we would all be getting free, right? The carceral state is pertaining to prison because samsara is a prison, and it's a prison that most people don't know they're trapped in. So it's an extremely subversive situation here, Buddhism is solely a path of liberation, right? But Buddhism came to the West and to these Western countries, and all of a sudden Buddhism was about happiness, right? And then mindfulness became about happiness, right? This is just kind of a capitalistic spin on liberation, liberatory path. If you're happy, you produce more, you work more, right? But liberation is actually frustrating all of these mechanisms of production and accumulation and assimilation, right? And it's actually like shoving that to the side and saying there has to be more than this, and then that kind of practice of liberation actually becomes fugitivity, because those of us who are working to get free are actually, what's the word? We're actually misunderstood, right? And then if you're misunderstood, then people are going to try to get in your way, because they don't know what you're doing. It's confusing, But another situation I think that we face too is that when we start practicing liberation, we start reminding people that they're not free, right? And because they're not interested in putting the labor in to get free, they will just try to annihilate you to forget about the whole thing, right? So don't remind me that I'm not free, right? And I'm going to take care of you by getting rid of you, and so I won't be reminded, right, that I'm not free. And I think that kind of annihilation is seen over and over and over again. We tend to try to erase the people who are attempting to remind us of who we really are, right? So much of, I would say, the anti-trans legislation that's coming up in, many states right now is an expression of that. Like, there are people who are showing us how to be free, but we actually don't know how to hold that labor, right? It's too much, it's overwhelming. We just want to be comfortable and happy. We don't want to ask questions. We don't want to have the agency to choose who we are, right? Because that's too much work. So I just want to stay put. Like, this is where I was put. I was born, this is what I got when I was born. I'm just going to stay here and do this. That's not liberatory work. That's actually getting wrapped up in carceral logics, within spiritual abolition. So when we choose freedom, I mean, I just, even just about my personal life, like when I decided to take spiritual practice seriously, people thought I, again, lost it. I mean, some of you have read Radical Dharma and Love and Rage, so, I tell those stories in those books, but I was so shocked at how my choice to get free felt like a personal insult to everyone in my life, except the people who really love me. And that's what you deal with. That's what Harriet Tubman had to deal with. That's what Sojourner Truth had to deal with. And William Lloyd Garrison, and all these abolitionists, anti-slavery abolitionists, like their lives were at risked, and not just the physical world, because this is not just about the physical world, the material world. This is the unseen world. There are beings in the unseen world who don't want us to be free either. So when you start actually choosing freedom, you're going to draw the attention of both seen and unseen forces, right? And that's what these great abolitionists were actually dealing with. Not just the people, but also the demons, right? So there's a weightiness here. Like this is a serious issue. When we choose to start getting free, we're going to lose shit. We will become targets. And for me, that's okay, right? Because we have the resources to get free if we can just develop the faith in these resources, right? If we can have faith in Chenrezig, or Mahakala, or Tara, or the other protectors, right? If we develop really sincere faith, that faith opens up into a really deep conviction, but that conviction is actually a way that our minds and hearts begin to open to drink in and to take in and absorb, like, the blessings of these deities, right? So the more faith we have, the more we can take in the protection and the awakening of wisdom deities, and other deities that are here to help us get free, right? So not all deities are liberated, right? A deity doesn't have to be good or bad. A deity is just a deity, But when we are practicing in Tantra, right, we're practicing mostly with wisdom deities like Chenrezig, who are manifesting really out of emptiness itself, right? Technically, Chenrezig is a bodhisattva, not a Buddha. But I think that we're far along enough now to, like, not really deal with that technicality. when you're as far along as Chenrezig is down the path, you're pretty much enlightened, right? But Chenrezig is like a 10th level bodhisattva. I'm not going to go into it, and on that level, Chenrezig has this incredible ability, right, to manifest in ways that we can't even imagine, you know. So Chenrezig means great eye. So Chen is great, Zig is eye, so the great eye. And the connotation there is that Chenrezig holds everything, right? Which is an expression of love, just to hold, not to react, to hold, right? And a way to get into that experience is to think about the times when you've just been held, right? Not judged, not reacted to, but when someone has just opened to you and they're just holding everything that you're sharing without flinching. That's what Chenrezig is doing. And that's what we're training to do. There's another story too, which is really important to share as well, which kind of explains more of this. But at the beginning of my practice, like probably literally everyone here, you may have read Loving Kindness by Sharon Salzberg, teaching metta, right? Loving Kindness metta. And so of course, that was one of the first books that I read. And I, would go through the practice and I would be like, oh, this is so easy. All I have to do is sit here and just say these phrases, right? May I be well, may I be whatever. It's like, great, easy, check. It's like, yeah, I got this done. What's the next practice? And then I started studying with Lama John McCransky, and Lama John developed a benefactor practice. And I started doing that, and I was like, oh, this is easy too. And by the way, that benefactor practice that I learned from Lama John is actually the basis for the 7 homecomings practice that I use and teach now. Just sitting and receiving love from a benefactor, easy, check. Check, check, check. I was like, I'm gonna nail this whole Buddhism thing, right? And so I, end up in retreat, in 3-year retreat. And so in 3-year retreat, you get a lot of practices that no one's ever heard of, because secrecy creates mysticism, and mysticism creates a kind of cultish, occult mentality, right? Which is true. It's a cult and it's also a cult, right? That's not an exaggeration. That's what these communities are. But just another disclosure, I don't really think of cult as a negative word. So that may or may not be good. When I hear cult, I get curious and I say, but what are they doing? Because cults have given us some really great shit. There's a lot of people over, in this country who've gotten together, lived together, right? And just did some shit, and created things, that's just a normal part of our lives. But that's another talk for another day. So, but in retreat, we were offered a practice. We've had to move through a practice called Jawa Jamso. And we just say Jamso for short. So Jamso is the more evolved, serious practice of Chenrezig. And that's when shit got real for me. When you're starting to deal with practices that really are going deep and triggering really intense energy, right? So I started practicing Jamso and had this really intense experience where I realized that I actually didn't love myself like I thought I did. And I began to contact this experience of really a chasm, a hole, a dark hole in my experience. And I was like, shit, I've never seen that before. Right? So as usual, what one would do, you try to fill it up with positive energy. with affirmations. May you be well, may you be, you know, all of that. And it just wasn't working. Like it would just, the darkness of that chasm would just consume everything that I directed into it. And then so I got really frustrated and just started thinking about it more. And then slowly I began to understand that the point wasn't to fill this hole up, but the point was to allow it to be there. And that's what began to transform my relationship to practices like Chenrezig, benefactor practices, metta, and loving kindness practices. I said, oh, that's the point, is to hold and accept everything, not try to fix it. Right. And that's what we struggle with even now. It's like we were so trained to habitually react to everything and try to fix everything. Right. When we have to start with learning how to notice and name something and allow it to be there, like we do in snow. You know, just to allow it to be there. And when you allow something to be there, then you're invited to move into the experiencing of that thing. And that's where the real work is, actually, the experiencing. Right? I had to experience what that darkness was in my practice. Right? I had to get really intimate with it. Right? Again, I wasn't fixing it. I wasn't covering it up. I wasn't trying to fill it up. Right? I was just learning how to experience this thing that I had been bypassing my whole life. And that's where love began. When you get to the point of holding and deep acceptance and saying, you know what, this shit is here. Right? When you get there, you've gotten somewhere. Right? And to be able to hold everything. Right? And then you experience, and then after you experience, or as you're experiencing, then you're figuring out how to respond. Right? But you can't get there until you actually taste what's on the plate, in using food language. Right? So these are the blessings of Chenrezig. The practice that I offer is this basic practice around using fire. So using the heat element to encircle the heart chakra. And that heat is actually meant to start awakening the heart chakra. And that awakening of the heart chakra actually offers us a kind of fluidity and spaciousness that supports holding and accepting everything. Right? And again, I don't know if I pointed this out, but like, when we talk about holding space and accepting, it doesn't mean that I agree with it. You know, it doesn't mean that I like it. Right? And if you're thinking that like, this is going to be a path where you're going to like shit, that's not going to be the case. Right? Like, so you have to get rid of wanting to be comfortable. You have to get rid of like censoring happiness and everything. And you have to get rid of wanting to like the practice. Like, who cares if you don't like the practice? You know how many times I've had to like sit my ass down and say, you know what, I hate this shit. Right? You know how many fucking prostrations I had to do in 3 years? Right? Like 200,000, over 200,000 prostrations. Every fucking prostration, I was like, get me the fuck out of here. I'm not like I just want to be honest about that. Like, I don't like prostrations. So that's actually one of the few things in Tantra, in Buddhist Tantra, that I don't so much care for. But you have to eat the dislike. Like, you have to eat it. Right? You have to say, yeah, but this is going to help me get free. So like it or not, this is what I'm doing. Right? but it helps to have a faith that this will actually get you free. And I'm focusing on the form of Chenrezig. You probably can't see this because of the light, but it's hard to see with the light. But the form of Chenrezig as 1,000-arm Chenrezig. So again, Chenrezig, like all deities in any pantheon, can take on any form that they want. So 1,000-arm Chenrezig is the manifestation of Chenrezig from their two-armed form. And the story behind that is that Chenrezig was meditating in some universe, wherever, and trying to free beings, right, through their meditation, through their meditative absorption, right? And then Chenrezig came out of the meditation and realized that they hadn't really done much. Like, they thought they were working really hard, but realized that they hadn't done as much as they thought they could have been doing or should have done, which is something that I think all of us can identify with. You know, it's like, for particularly those of us in justice work, community organizing, things like that, you work really fucking hard and you don't necessarily get a lot of like return. You know, this is why social movements are multi-generation projects, right? And so Chenrezig had that experience and then just lost hope and faith in the work, and then got so frustrated. Chenrezig, they exploded. They fell into all these pieces. And then Amitabha shows up. Amitabha, who is the Buddha of bliss, actually. So when we say limitless light, so we say Amitabha is the Buddha of limitless light. That limitless light is actually expression of the essence of the mind, that the essential energy of the mind is bliss, right? And so Amitabha is the deity that embodies bliss, right? So anyway, Amitabha comes, sees Chenrezig in a million pieces, and Amitabha was like, girl, what happened? This is the queer remix, by the way. Like, this is, and I use gender neutral pronouns for Chenrezig because Chenrezig is actually quite gender fluid. Again, manifesting more as femme-centered. But I just use they because that's how I relate to Chenrezig. Anyway, so Amitabha comes and it's like, girl, what happened? You know, maybe, you know, Amitabha can be like RuPaul, and then, you know, whatever, you know, Chenrezig can be like a queen. Like, let's just say Detox, for instance, because I just finished watching something about her. I know if you don't watch RuPaul's Drag Race, this is a different language. I don't watch RuPaul's Drag Race either. That's a disclosure, but I follow all the queens. And so Amitabha RuPaul comes over and it's like, okay, girl, let me help you. You know, like, we're gonna skip the, you know, lip sync for your life because you really don't have your shit together to do any of that. So I'm just gonna like put you back together. And so Amitabha puts Chenrezig back together, this time as 1,000-armed Chenrezig, multi-heads. Each hand has an eye in it. So 1,000 eyes, 1,000 hands. And Amitabha goes, well, this is a new form for you. This is going to increase your capacity to hold space and to accept and to, you know, just to be present for as many beings as possible, right? And that gave Chenrezig a new lease, or just a new motivation to continue the work. And that's a really important story in terms of 1,000-armed Chenrezig, because we have to, like, when we reach our limit, Tantra says, go further. Like when you hit the edge, when you hit the edge of the cliff, Tantra says, okay, now jump off the cliff, right? And that goes back to the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra, the mantra of the Heart Sutra is the Gate mantra, Gate Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhisoha, right? So that mantra essentially means that when you've gone as far as you can, keep going. And when you've gone as far as you can, then you keep going, right? So you just keep going. Every time you think you're finished, just keep going. And that's the teaching, that's the mantra. Beyond, right? Wherever you think beyond is, there's another beyond that. And that's how we get free, right? When you start letting go of this desire to get free, then that's a contradiction, right? Like, but what I mean specifically is that we have to let go of wanting to get anywhere and just do the path, do the journey. And that's where I want all of us to end up, right? I just want you just to do the work. And if we can just internalize that discipline of work, right, then we begin to cut through the resistance and the aversion to work, right? And it becomes essentially just what you do. Like you breathe without thinking about it. So we want to get our practice to a place where we're just doing practice and not even thinking about what we're doing as practice. In the same way that we relate to our really bad habits, we just fall right into those bad habits without thinking. We want to fall into liberatory practice eventually without thinking about it. And that's what the Gate mantra is asking us to do. Just to keep going. Forget that you're even practicing. Just say this is what life is the labor, getting clear. So let's move into the initial practice here. So I'm gonna offer this kind of empowerment exercise again for everyone to kind of awaken the frequency of Chenrezig force, right? And I'm doing that through my own experience, right? So I'm connected to Chenrezig. I'm going to transmit that frequency to you so that you actually start connecting to it, right? And these frequencies are very subtle, as well. But once you have the frequency, it's like you have the direct number to call up Chenrezig and be like, girl, girl, I'm about to put my hands on people. You need to to intervene, right? Chenrezig, take the wheel, so I'm about to run over some people, right? Or you can call Tara, right? But, everything is everything, as Lauryn Hill said. Chenrezig is Tara. Tara is Chenrezig. There's no other being than Chenrezig. I can just, you can take that, the formula in the Heart Sutra and just put anything in it. Like Tara is Chenrezig, Chenrezig is Tara. There's no Tara without Chenrezig. There's no Chenrezig without Tara. I mean, that's what we can do. So yeah. I know people are posting questions, so we're going to figure out all this, the questions and everything out as we continue with these sessions. But I want to start first. I like to offer a candle, the candle lit for our practice. And this is, for me, how I began to invite the deity into practice. And so the light, the flame, represents clarity, directness, illumination. This flame also represents the energy of the mind itself, which is bliss. And you can begin to experience what the awakening of this light in your mind and your body feels like. And of course, this light is only possible because of darkness. So even here, there's also a reverence for darkness, because darkness is also full of data and is also prepared to get us free, right? And this is why Chenrezig can transform into Mahakala, into, darker, ominous beings, right? Because there is a wisdom to darkness as well as a wisdom to light. And our practice, again, has to hold both of these experiences of light and dark. But for now, we're just going to walk in the light. And so as we begin, again, allowing your body to come into a position that feels appropriate for you for practice. And when you feel settled, I invite you to offer an intention for practice. Essentially, why are you practicing right now? Why are you beginning this particular path into the ring of fire, into Chenrezig's practice? And when you're ready, I invite you to shift your attention down to the seat, down to the weight of your body, making contact with the seat. Noticing how the seat rises to hold you. And allowing the body to really, your body to really settle into the seat, to feel that groundedness. So I think whenever we move into these really esoteric, kind of like fluid practices, we have to connect to the earth. And in connecting to the earth, we're actually asking the earth, which represents stability, form, to really ground us as we move up into these higher states of consciousness. And if you connect to the earth element like this, then you can more easily find your way back to this timeline. Particularly for those of you who really like journeying is something that you do really effortlessly. And what I mean by journeying, I mean you can project your consciousness into higher states of consciousness, into other realms, into other timelines, and so forth, right? But sometimes it's hard to get back, and this is why in this moment we connect to the seat. Of course, under the seat is the earth. We feel that stability rising. And in this space, you can just even formally ask the earth to hold you, right? And to show you how to come back to the body, to the seat, to this timeline. And it's time for you to do so. So when you feel ready to continue, we're going to proceed now into calling in the benefactors of our homecoming circle. And we'll just move pretty quickly through this as well. So we begin by just shifting our attention to the realm of our unseen benefactors. And we begin by calling into the space our teachers, guides, and mentors. Any being, right, who has taught us how to be free in some way, invite them into the space around you. Now I invite you just to call into the space the energy of what I call your wisdom texts. And the wisdom texts are just teachings, scriptures, spiritual, lessons or teachings, that have inspired you in some aspect of liberation work. And this includes arts, right? Philosophies, music, writing, whatever. Like you're collecting these artifacts, which are just expressions of energy pointing us to freedom. So call that energy into the space right now. And when you're ready, begin to call into your space the communities that you're a part of, the communities who love and hold you, calling all of those people, beings into the space around you. Now we begin to call into the space our ancestors, and particularly our beneficial, benevolent ancestors. So only ancestors who are able to arise to offer resources and support for this work, not necessarily ancestors that need our support right now. So it's okay just to only invite benevolent, resourced ancestors ready to contribute to this work, and asking those ancestors who actually need work to not enter into the circle. And I also invite you to call into the circle your lineages. So the people, the continuum of people who have made it possible for you to practice or engage in something that's really important for you, be it your spiritual lineages, all the teachers and practitioners of those lineages, or your lineages of maybe thinkers and philosophers that have really deeply inspired you, or however you identify, right? If you're an artist, the lineage of artists that has created the capacity for you to practice your art and activism as well, whatever it is, invite those beings in because they have more to offer us. So we continue by connecting to the earth again. Calling in the earth to hold us, calling in the energy of silence as well that helps to offer us the space and the stillness to cut through distractions as we move deeper into the practice. And lastly, we call ourselves into the circle. And so it's just kind of tuning into the circle that we've gathered, our homecoming circle, or our circle of benefactors. Beings who care for us, beings who love us, beings who want us to get free. I want you to imagine now that this homecoming circle actually begins to absorb love, the energy of love from the whole universe around us. So as if the homecoming circle begins to magnetize and draw in all the love in the universe, this deep need, this wish for all beings to be free and resourced and safe and happy. And they begin to absorb this love and they begin to glow intensely around you as they collect this love that's intensifying in their circle. And this becomes essentially the first ring of fire, which is the energy of love itself radiating intensely from your homecoming circle. And slowly we begin to imagine that this homecoming circle, this ring of fire and love, begins to radiate that energy into your heart center. And slowly your heart center begins to awaken with the intensity of this love gathered from the universe itself. And slowly we begin to imagine that Chenrezig in their 1,000-arm appearance begins to awaken in the heart center. Just as this illusion, this kind of apparition, like a hologram. So it's not tangible, but it's just this expression of light. And slowly we begin to imagine that Chenrezig in our heart center also begins to glow in this radiant white light. And it begins to radiate through our whole bodies. And the expression of energy from Chenrezig in our heart centers is so intense that our bodies, our physical bodies, begin to dissipate and dissolve in this white light. And for a moment, our minds are released back into the essence of all phenomena, into the emptiness, the energy, and space, all boundless expressions. That even for a split second, we can experience this freedom. And then slowly, in our energy forms, we begin to re-arise, to reform as Chenrezig themselves. White in color, with 1,000 arms and 1,000 hands, each with an eye in the palm. Dressed in these radiant garments, these silks, precious materials and jewels. We feel ourselves adorned as the deity. Radiant, beautiful, translucent, boundless, spacious, awakened. We are Chenrezig. And in our heart centers, we begin to hear and feel the vibration and frequency of the most sacred syllable in Tantra, which is Om. And just together in our own spaces, let's chant Om 3 times and feeling the energy and vibration of Om awakening in your heart center as Chenrezig. Taking a deep breath. Slowly, the energy of the whole mantra begins to awaken in our heart centers. And the mantra becomes the speech and the language and the expression of Chenrezig's awakened consciousness. This mantra becomes the path into becoming the awakened mind of Chenrezig. And so I'm going to say one syllable at a time. So after I offer you a syllable, you repeat it in your own space, imagining that you see the letters, the English letters of the mantra in your heart center, syllable by syllable. And this is the transmission of the mantra from my lineage into your practice. We begin. Om. Mani. Padme. Om. And do it 2 more times. Om. Mani. Padme. Om. Om. Mani. Padme. Om. And having received the mantra together, we recite it. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. And in English, the translation, homage to the jewel at the heart of the lotus, to the experience of union itself. And we'll just start chanting it. You just follow along with me. And again, as we chant it a few times, just feeling the energy of the mantra, awakening in the heart center, and slowly beginning to incorporate energetically into your energy body, where it will remain for the rest of this life and even into the next lives. Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 And with that, you have received the lineage of practice related to the profound path of Chenrezig. And having this mantra now, it is a part of your energy body, your spirit, your mind, your physical body. And the mantra is always available for you as a doorway into the expression of Chenrezig themselves. And as we prepare to transition out of the practice, we turn our attention back to our homecoming circle, still radiating love. And we begin to imagine that they begin to dissolve into white light. And that white light is absorbed into our bodies as Chenrezig. And slowly we begin to imagine that ourselves as Chenrezig also begins to dissolve into white light. And how this white light begins to dissolve into emptiness itself. And our minds are released, it begins to expand into emptiness and space itself. And we rest there for a few moments, letting whatever calm, letting whatever happens, happen. Just noticing and allowing. And slowly, now we begin to re-arise back into our physical bodies, back into this timeline, in this moment. We shift our attention back to our seats, noticing the weight of our bodies. And we can begin to offer some simple, slow movements back to our bodies, even adding a few deep cleansing breaths, breathing deeply into the nose, down to the very bottom of the diaphragm, and breathing out of the mouth, releasing that air. Right. So coming back into the space now. So you've received the transmission of the frequency, which is the consciousness of Medicine Buddha. And the lineages, from the lineages that I practice and study in, but rendered through my relationship with Chenrezig. And so thank you so much for your practice today. And so between now and when we meet again next month, go ahead, you can go ahead now, if you haven't already, and work through some of the practices, or the main practice is only one practice now. Unlike Medicine Buddha, we have like 100 practices in Medicine Buddha now. But we just have one of Chenrezig right now, and that's on YouTube. So those are the practice sessions. And that's, you can start working with, awakening the flame and letting that flame rise up into a ring of fire. So those recordings are great for that. But next month, we'll come back and start working through the practice, this initial practice itself. Okay. And then we'll slowly also begin some transitioning into working with the mantra as a separate practice as well. Okay. I know we're 10 minutes past, but are there any quick questions? If you asked a question earlier, if you want to repost that, that would be fine. Yeah, a prayer is a portal. A prayer, a prayer is like an opening. So when we pray, I have a whole chapter on prayer in New Saints. I'm gonna keep saying that for 10 months, by the way. And then when you ask me what the practice is, I'm gonna tell you, wait till the book comes out. Yeah, so prayer, I know maybe some of you haven't heard this, but prayer is the principal spiritual technology right now in the world. Prayer and meditation, but particularly prayer, because prayer is directing energy. And we want to direct good, liberatory, positive energy into the world, into our situations, into our lives right now. And we have to channel that. So prayer is channeling as well. So opening, asking for what you need, allowing that energy to move through you, because that energy is going to start gathering what you need. It's going to start gathering your resources. Yeah, the physical sensation of the mantra is exactly my first experience of the mantra with my friend Sering. And again, Sering was Tibetan. So he was probably late 40s. I was in my 20s back then. So he held like heritage and lineage, in his transference of consciousness. So you got that as well. Like you got his energy, which was the first energy and transmission that I received. To get that from an authentic, indigenous, really practitioner is really important, And then later I got the mantra from my group teacher, Nola Rinpoche, as well. So if my iTunes is not working right now for some reason, but I usually like to play the mantra that I received from my teacher, but I can't get it to play, but we're going to do that next month. I think that's it. Tomorrow night, for those of you who sit Medicine Buddha, we will begin our mantra practice, which will be a separate practice from our usual practice. So the mantra practice will be something I ask you to do pretty regularly in your personal practice. So we'll set all of that up tomorrow. We'll do the same thing for Chenrezig as well in maybe a couple of months. Ideally, once we get this going, there's going to be a couple of practice groups a month meeting at different times. So some of you will be able to lead those sessions and at least have one monthly session with me on top of practice groups meeting throughout the month. So that's the plan. So thank you so much, everyone. You'll get the dates for the rest, for the next couple of months as well. Set up. I think that is it for me. I hope to see some of you tomorrow in Medicine Buddha. And also, I may see some of you in small group next week as well. Let's see. Is Gendon still on? Can you email me again? Yeah, thank you. I lost the, I don't know what happened. I literally don't know how I lose an email. Since I never check emails, so I don't know where it would go. I meant, I check email like all the time, so I don't know if I overlooked it or it went into trash. Okay, that's it, everyone. Thank you so much. Please take care of yourself, and I will see you all in some form this week. Thank you, everyone. Be well.